Today on episode 433 of I Am Salt Lake podcast, we are joined by Jeremy Gross, the head brewmaster at Salt Lake City's newest brewery, Grid City Beer Works. We had a great conversation with Jeremy. We got to talk about everything from what got him interested in brewing beer to opening up this brewery right in the middle of a pandemic. It was a great conversation. We're going to get into that here in just a moment. But before we do get into that conversation, we of course have to introduce ourselves. We're the hosts of the show. My name is Chris Hollifield.
And my name's Chrissy Hollifield. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, you may be wondering what it's all about. Well, this podcast is all about showcasing awesome people in Salt Lake City, Utah. We get to talk to business owners, comedians, authors, tattoo artists, restaurant owners, breweries, distilleries, really anyone that might have a cool story to share.
All right. Are you thinking of maybe moving to Salt Lake City? Are you looking at finally getting out of the rent game? Is something gnawing on you to say, get out of the rent game? Hey, you need to contact our good friend Monique at Market Source Real Estate. The cool thing is, she actually helped us find the home that we're recording this podcast in right now.
And for the last 20 years, Market Source Real Estate has been specializing in helping people just like you and me buy and sell homes in Sugar House as well as the greater Salt Lake area.
The cool thing is they have a background in flipping houses because they've owned almost 20 homes themselves. So they really know all the ins, all the outs of older homes, if older homes are your thing.
And if you're looking to sell your home, Market Source Real Estate specializes in helping sellers update or repair their homes to increase their value and make sellers more money.
All right, so if you're looking to move to Salt Lake City or maybe just move across town, whatever it is, you need to contact Monique at Market Source Real Estate. You can find her info at thinksaltlakecity.com, or better yet, her phone number, 801-810-6773. Many thanks to Market Source Real Estate for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Let's get into that conversation that we had with Jeremy Gross, the head brewmaster at Grid City Beer Works. Enjoy the conversation. Here we go. But let's start right in with what your role is at Grid City Beer Works and how that started for you.
Okay. Like I said, my name is Jeremy Gross. I am the head brewer partner for Grid City Beer Works, Salt Lake City, Utah. Startup brewery, brew pub, restaurant. This started 5 years ago when I was introduced to Drew Reynolds, the CEO, through a mutual friend. And then he had moved in next to another gentleman named Justin Beliveau. And Justin Beliveau is the president of our company. Drew came over to my house one day and tasted one of my beers. And it's his least favorite style, IPA, and he loved it. I made him love IPA, so he kind of hates me for it. But so after that, he literally gave me a credit card and funded my brewing operations. I've been brewing beer for him for 5 years. So the beers that we're serving in-house, I've brewed 40 or 50 times just on a small system.
So how long have you been brewing beer, like as a hobby? Like when did you get into it?
20 years. So I moved to Park City when I was 19 in 1997. Call it the dark days of the Utah beer. You couldn't get full strength beer, but at the liquor store, sitting on a shelf at 70 degrees, there were very few options. So I, like a lot of brewers, bought a homebrew kit and started brewing beer, and then just fell in love with it and continued reading all I could about it. And I was also working in fine dining restaurants, been all over the world through wine countries, of really kind of in love with wine as well, and spirits as well, kind of a passion for me as well. So, but just kept brewing, and then got a job at the Bohemian in 2003 when they were pretty new, and then worked there for about a year, driving all the way from Park City to Midvale to work there for very little money. But I got some cool experience. Got to work in a brewery and work with authentic Czech styles, which was pretty cool.
Were you brewing beer at Bohemian?
I was the assistant brewer, so I was cleaning tanks and helping with brews and delivering beer, cleaning lines, all the grunt work, lifting kegs just with my back into the van and delivering them. Yeah.
But learning from the master, right?
Yeah, the guy I worked under, his name's Chainsaw. He works for the co-op, Utah Beer Co-op now. And he had learned off of the guy that started it, and this guy was literally off the boat from the Czech Republic. So very authentic brewing, traditional brewing styles from the Czech Republic. That's not where like I got all my knowledge, but that was a good start and kind of piqued my interest in it. And I've always been interested in those styles, and going to Germany and Europe and drinking the beer there is an inspiration for how I like to drink beer and brew beer. So, and then I took a break from the Bohemian. Just couldn't really afford to drive down there for what I was getting paid, and kind of learned what I learned, and then moved on, continued to bartend and work in fine dining restaurants. And then a little later got a job at Uenta Brewing Company as a production brewer. I call it their small system. Now they have a really big production system. It's like 130 barrels or something, brew house. But I worked on their 40 barrel system, which is still pretty big. It's 4 times our brew house at Grid City. I worked there producing wort for a few years, and then and then my wife got pregnant and couldn't work for beer anymore. So I had to quit Uena, and then I ended up getting a job at High West Distillery. Well, funny enough, I moved down to Salt Lake to work at Uena to be closer, and then I ended up getting a job at the High West. So either way, I was driving that canyon like 5 days a week. But I was with High West for the last 7 years, all while we were hatching this plan, man. You know, it's been a long road. We've changed the business model a little bit. And then everything finally came to fruition. You know, started construction in June. And then just as we were about to open our doors, 2 days before the ribbon cutting, they shut everything down. So it's been a wild ride. So here we are.
And I want to get into all that. I do have one question, though, and just because I'm kind of intrigued. So you were distilling liquor then at High West, right?
I was actually a bartender.
Okay.
And I hung out with distillers a lot. And I worked with the bar program. So did a lot of unique kind of cocktails and beer cocktails. And they have a great bar program. The bar managers are great up there. And really High West in general is kind of an iconic brand nationwide and kind of put Utah on the map as far as liquor is concerned. So I think they're doing awesome stuff. Everything they've done is great for Utah and great for the U.S., honestly. So
yeah, I was just curious. I was curious because I was like, well, I wonder what he likes better, you know, distilling liquor or beer. But
yeah, well, they get mad at me, my partners, when I talk about my love for spirits. But yeah, you know, I'm definitely very interested in that and have a lot of knowledge in that realm. I was a tour guide there as well, so I would take people around and do private tours of our big facility in Wanship and the Park City facility, and I would help train new tour guides and stuff. So just didn't get back into production just because of the financial aspect of it, right?
Do you ever see like Grid City going further than beer, like maybe getting into some whiskey and stuff like that?
Yes. I don't want to spill beans or anything. We have aspirations to do a bunch of different stuff. Sure. So, we're not just stopping. This was kind of our first one. We initially had planned a much bigger production facility with like a dog park and an outdoor German beer garden, but it just got a little big and scary. And so we decided to take a step back, and it was in an area part of town that didn't have the traffic and the eyeballs on it as our current location does. We're on 21st South and 333 West. So we're just like, we have 40 to 50,000 cars driving by our place every day, right across from Home Depot. So
I know
just
exactly
to have that traffic, to have that traffic is just great, you know. So we decided to do a smaller brewery, even though it's almost as expensive as the big one.
So you mentioned you did the ribbon cutting 2 days after.
No, we were set to do the ribbon cutting.
But you guys are open now, though.
We're open for to go.
Okay.
Curbside pickup.
How is that? I mean, is that hard to keep your excitement going when you kind of have this big slap in the face?
Well, you know, it's a little humbling. So yeah. We're just taking it day by day. Honestly, things are changing so fast. We have the option to open for in-house dining and drinking, but it's just not really what we want to do right now. Sure. We don't want our first experience to be like that, what the state is offering. So there are certain guidelines that are just kind of limiting for in-house.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because you got to like space people out, like 10 feet, 6 feet, something like that, which would be really hard to do.
And we have a gigantic, huge, beautiful bar, like right in front of the brewery. Like you're looking down the cellar to the brew house. So it's part of the experience, and the bar is part of the experience. And you can't actually have people at the bar right now. So it's a little bit of a bummer. So we're going to wait it out. We have some things planned for the summer. Things we're working on that are going to be unique and kind of pretty exciting. I can't talk too much about them because they're not really approved yet. But we're going to be doing some cool stuff to pique people's interest and hopefully get some social interactions with people. And then until we can open safely and the way we want to open, that's really the kind of path we're taking right now. Plus, we're going to wait for other people to open and see how it goes for those guys too. So
I think that's what everybody's doing, though.
We're all just waiting for everybody else.
Well, there's a few places open.
Yeah, there are. It is kind of, it's like, well, what do we do? But what about live music? I mean, are you going to be able to like have an acoustic guitar player or anything like that, like inside there, or what kind of space do you have inside?
We have a rooftop deck, so the whole building is like 6,600 square feet. 2,000 of that is brewery space, and above the brewery space, we ripped out the entire ceiling. So basically took almost 2/3 of the ceiling off the building, took it down to 4 walls, ripped out the concrete, repoured all the concrete, poured the concrete in the brewery to slope. So, all the liquids drain. We don't have pools of water hanging out where bacteria can grow. And then we reinforced the rooftop deck with steel beams as we have to make it seismically acceptable for code to have people on the deck. So then we have a 1,700 square foot deck on top of the brewery.
Wow.
Where the brewery is. And we are building a bar up there, and we already have lines drawn from our cold storage. So the beer will be drawn from the cold storage to the front bar and the rooftop deck bar. And we just haven't been able to finish the rooftop deck bar. We went a little over budget on our brewery, but we were planning on doing that this summer. But COVID kind of killed that for a second. But we're still planning on doing that.
No, man, I'm really stoked that your spirit's like, and I guess that's kind of, I mean, there's no other way to do it, right? You just got to keep plowing forward. I think it's awesome. I mean, what do you do? Yeah, I guess you don't really have a lot of other choices.
Go big or go home
in the matter.
And we're all home
with what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, we got some relief from the government. We're not paying taxes yet. So, pay deferments on our loan, break on taxes, and the Paycheck Protection Program is getting me paid still. But yeah, it's every day is looking a little brighter, but there's always a bit of darkness there too. But you got to look to the light, right? So
yeah. So how can people try your beer like right now? Where can they pick it up?
At the brewery.
Okay, just come in and buy it at the brewery to go.
As fresh as it possibly is.
How many different brews do you have?
We have 5 different beers now. We have a traditional house pilsner, which is a very traditional Czech style pilsner. Clocks in at 4.5 ABV. And then we have a hoppy pilsner, which is similar to the house pilsner. It goes through a similar process, but it's only single decocted, not double decocted. So double decoction is the house pilsner. That's kind of what they do in Czech. They do triple to single decoction, depending on the beer. And do you guys know what decoction is?
I don't. No, tell me.
So decoction is a very labor-intensive process. They originally did it because they didn't understand enzymes back in the day. So during the mash, you have a series of different mash rests, temperature rests that do different things, and different enzymes work at different rests. So back in the day, they just did it by a finger test. They would pull a portion of the mash and boil it, and then add that back. And due to the viscosity of the mash, they would notice things are happening. Sugars are being created from starch and whatnot. And so they still do that in Czech, and it's a very, very labor-intensive process. But it basically creates what they call Maillard reactions, the caramelization. You get the same thing if you're cooking down soup or something. You'll get these Maillard reactions. It's just a caramelization interaction of amino acids and proteins. But anyway, it creates a really rich malty beer, but it takes a long time to do. And a lot of people don't do it because a lot of malts are modified. Nowadays, I use an unmodified malt, and then I go through this long process to create this authentic style beer. So anyway, both pilsners are decocted. The house is double decocted, and the hoppy is single decocted. So I only do one decoction on the hoppy pilsner. So double decocted pilsner, I'm there 16 hours a day. Single decocted, I'm only there like 12 hours a day.
Wow.
So anyway, the hoppy pilsner is 100% pilsner malt, just like the house pilsner. It's single decocted, like I said, and it's hopped similarly, but with Tettnang, not Saaz hops, all the way up until the very end. And then the whirlpool, which is the very last point that the beer is in the kettle before it enters the fermenter and it's chilled. I add a ton of lemon drop hops, which are these super bright, lemony, kind of citrusy hops, kind of really nice hops. So that adds this distinct kind of lemony zest and zing to the beer.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Salt Lake City Dreadlock Shop. The Salt Lake City Dreadlock Shop's mission is to make Utah cool, one dreadlock at a time, while offering a clean, affordable, and professional experience filled with love and understanding. And I know because I can personally vouch that this is true. These guys are amazing. They will help you with anything you need. You can text them to get a free consultation or ask questions or get advice. Their phone number is 801-824-8298. You can text them, tell them what you're looking for, include your name, and send them a picture so they can give you kind of an estimate of what your hair would cost. Wait for a response. They will text you sooner than you think. You can also visit them at slcdreads.com or follow them on Facebook and Instagram. And thank you to Salt Lake City Dreadlock Shop for sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
Now, you guys serve food there, right, as well?
Yeah, we have an awesome chef, man. He's just came from a fine dining restaurant in Chicago and worked at this awesome place in Tampa, Florida, where my buddy does business. And our general manager actually was from the same restaurant. It's called Stein and Vine, and they do this awesome Stein and Vine. So they have beer and wine, and they do this really creative, awesome food. And the place is just packed. All it says is pub on the front, and it's in a strip mall. And you wouldn't even know it's there. And the place is just like a locals hangout. Everyone knows about it. So they work there together. And then his name's Ian, and Jen is our general manager. And so he had an inside shot at the job. So we ended up hiring him, and he came from Chicago. He was hating his life. He was working in fine dining and just wasn't loving it. Had a chance to come out and, move to Utah. So we did. And he's super creative. He's done a lot of Southern cooking. He's worked at Japanese grills. Like, the dude's really creative. So we're having fun going back and forth with our creativity on food and beer and spirits and stuff. So we're going to do some cool stuff, I think, with our food and our beer once we get open. So we're excited to bring that level. Not many people, like, when they open a brewery, even if they have food, they kind of like the food's the redhead stepchild. Right. And it just angers me. Like, I've been to a lot, like some really good brew pubs outside of the state that treat the food as an equal playing field. And I think they go together really well. So that's kind of part of our philosophy. We want elevated food and beer. And I think that's going to be a game changer, honestly. So
yeah, that creates a more solid experience, when both things are high quality. Yeah.
And, it might be a little more expensive because we're using like local ingredients and high quality meats. We're not, using factory farm meats. We're passionate about, the environment and all those things. So I think people are going to get it and enjoy it. If not, we'll be drinking and eating it all.
Drinking and eating well.
That's what we're doing now.
What is it about brewing beer that you love? I mean, there's got to be like a few things or one thing about it that you just love.
It's the whole process, man. It's the smells, it's the process, it's the science, it's the art. Like, there's so much that goes into it. There's the blood, the sweat, the tears, the danger of killing yourself if you do something wrong. Like, it's a crazy thing, man. You're dealing with harsh chemicals, you're dealing with pressurized vessels. So you can get hurt if you're not paying attention. You can have a lot of fun. You can have really bad days. Things can go wrong. All kinds of things can go wrong, and they do. Like, when I worked at Uwana, just when you're in a production brewery like that, something's always breaking, so you're constantly fixing things. Luckily, we have a pretty new brewery, and there's still things that go wrong once in a while, but that's where kind of maintenance comes in. You got to maintain your equipment. So it's just everything, and it's the lifestyle. You walk in a brewery, you smell the fermentation, and in our brewery, it almost smells too much like a brewery. You're right at the bar, and I'm dumping, harvesting yeast. I'm brewing. You smell all the smells. Like, it's a pretty crazy environment in there. Like, you really feel like you're in a brewery there because there's no glass walls. There's nothing. It's just brew house. All the vessels, the stainless steel vessels, are right behind the bar. It's pretty crazy.
Do you ever see yourself like teaching classes, teaching people how to brew beer?
We had like plans for all kinds of stuff like that, bring homebrew clubs in and stuff. So that's all kind of on the back burner until we open and we figure out how to do it. But yeah, I mean, we want to be engaged with the community and stuff however we can. But I'll be pretty busy, man. Rather than teach classes, I think I'm probably just going to be working, sweating.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Empire Merchandise. Remember, when you support our sponsors like Empire, you're supporting this podcast. Empire Merchandise carries the best vape juice, mods, CBD, glass pipes, clothing, and so much more. Empire is located right downtown at 680 South State Street in beautiful Salt Lake City. Stop in, check the place out, pick up some vape juice, and tell them that I Am Salt Lake podcast sent you. And many thanks to Empire Merchandise for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. There's so many breweries here in the Salt Lake area. I mean, do you guys all get along pretty good or what?
Yeah, man. Honestly, it's a great community. A lot of those guys have been great to us and helped us out. Whether it's like using their keg machine, because our keg machine was supposed to be here in December and it's still not here. So things like that, and then people, trading ingredients and helping each other out with hops or crowler cans. It's a pretty tight community.
Well, I would imagine you like to drink each other's beers, right? It's
of course.
One of those things that it's like.
Well, and the cool thing is everyone's not necessarily doing the same thing. So you can get a wide variety of styles and flavors by just drinking other people's beers, because there's things I'm probably never going to do, like a milkshake IPA with lactose. I probably never see me do that.
Now, why would you never do that?
It's just not my thing.
I was going to say, it sounds good.
I was going to say, I don't think I'd even try
my partner's vegan, so I don't want to brew a beer that he can't drink. It'd be kind of messed up,
Okay.
We'll be doing all kinds of unique stuff. I mean, we had plans to do some really unique stuff. So we have an area of the brewery cut out that we're calling Jeremy Street. Our original brewery was on Jeremy Street on a big property near the Heritage Forge building in North Salt Lake. And so they carved it out. We already have glycol stubs to this area. So that's an area where we might have like a fooder, which is a big oak barrel where you can do some weird, unique beers in a gigantic oak barrel and get a unique woodiness to them. We're looking at even a concrete fermenter and doing some concrete fermentation. So this is all on the back burner right now, but this is stuff we're looking at once we get busy.
I kind of got lost there for a second. So you have another brewery? You have another warehouse?
No, it's just a side of the brewery that isn't fully built out yet.
Okay. I thought for some reason I was like, oh, wow, they got another location that they're brewing the beer out of.
No, we have very limited space, but we have just a couple little corners of the brewery where we can add a tank or two or have barrels and all that stuff. So once we get open and get our beers flowing and start making money, then we can start being a little more creative. Out of the gate, we're pretty traditional, honestly. So back to the beers. So I talked about the 2 Pilsners, and then the other 3 beers are kind of in their own category because they're all kind of ales and they're all kind of either British American hybrids or British styles. So our pale ale is 100% Golden Promise, which is a British malt and is a very, very nice sought after malt, really rich in character. And it literally has a little bit of crystal, and that's it. And then it's fermented with a British yeast, so kind of you get these fruity esters from the yeast that play well nice with the hops. And then we use 100% cryo hops. Are you guys familiar with cryo hops?
I'm not. No.
They sound cold.
Yeah. So that's how they're made. They use liquid nitrogen. So they basically put all the hop material in a room and extract the resins from the hop plant, leaving the plant material behind, and most of the resins and less of the hop material go into these compressed pellets, and it's double the flavor and aroma of a typical hop. So they're very pungent and very strong and very expensive. And I use those in this pale ale, and I put all the hops just in the whirlpool and just in the dry hop. So a lot of people put hops during the boil to create bitterness, right? But I put so many hops into the whirlpool and the dry hop that you get enough bitterness, and without that astringent bitterness, you get all fresh hop character instead of getting that broke down as astringent bitterness. Because the longer you boil a hop in a beer, the more the oils break down into these bittering oils, and you get that nasty beer, bitter beer face. If you remember that commercial.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all about balance. We don't want to have the bitter beer face, honestly. So it's got a big, juicy kind of malty body and super tropical nose and tropical kind of hop character. So it's easy to drink, refreshing, and you want to go back for another drink. So we kind of want people to drink more than one of our beers.
Yeah.
Do you ever get sick of beer, like drinking it?
I really do. Yeah, I do,
man.
You
do get sick of it?
Especially lately.
Because I would imagine you have to drink on the job.
Well,
right?
you have to taste.
Right?
Yeah,
you have to taste.
You don't want to be wasted at work, like most, Barney from The Simpsons, drinking under the tap or anything. But
well, at least you know your product that way.
Yeah, you have to, of course, know your product. And you have to know how it evolves. You have to taste it. in a can, if you can your beer. But by the way, bought a canning line after this all happened. So we're transitioning our business a little bit.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So you're going to be seeing our beer in Whole Foods starting Wednesday. We're doing our first delivery. So all 4 Whole Foods in Utah are going to have our beer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very cool.
And the
all
cans
5
are so cool looking.
They're cool, huh?
Yeah, I love them.
Who designed those for you? Do you have
it's one of our partners. He's our design guy. His name's James Grady. He's a professor on the East Coast, and he grew up with our partner Drew. Yeah, he's a badass graphic designer. So he does all of our designs. So
yeah, man, props to him.
Yeah, he did our logo and everything, which is, I don't know if you noticed the logo, but it's kind of like the meridian of Salt Lake. And
I was kind of trying to
like a dude drinking a beer at the same time. It's a G with the C on the inside. You could even see maybe a trumpet from Angel Moroni blown in there a little bit. There's levels to it, but you got to look at it and kind of figure it out.
It kind of looks like a power icon, so you get really excited. Like,
not to bring up the trumpet, because I know the trumpet fell down, but during the earthquake.
It's an homage, right?
I love the name. I love the name Grid City. How come nobody's ever used that name before?
When we heard about Grid City,
we were like, so brilliant.
Yeah,
I didn't love it. I didn't love it at first. Because it's kind of obvious, but then it's really grown on me. And just the way the concept of our business and the way it's grown and the philosophy of the business, it's really, and with our beers, like our beers are served 3 different ways, and we're at 333 West. There's 3 partners. Like everything's like, it's all kind of like come together as a grid. It's kind of interesting. So it's really grown on me a lot. And yeah, and I dig the name. And we're Beer Works, not just a typical brewery, because we do things the hard way, like open during a pandemic, decoct our beers.
Get your battle scars in early.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going to be ready for anything.
I want to try your honey cream ale.
Yeah, so our honey cream ale is pretty unique. I use some old school malts in that, Belgian and British malts. And then I buy this raw orange blossom honey from Ohio. And this honey is ridiculous. I've been using it for a long time. I've tried different honeys, and it was just never as good as this honey. And so I get 60 pounds of honey for each batch. So I do double batches when I brew. So I'm always there for at least 10 hours because we have a 10-barrel system, but we have 20-barrel fermenters. So I do 10-barrel batches. So I do 2 batches staggered back to back. The way our brew house is set up, I would have to have you there. But we have dueling kettles, so I can stagger brews. So it's kind of cool. But anyway, so that beer is like very delicately hopped. So it's got some rich malts, same British yeast that produces some nice fruity esters and leaves some residual body and sugar in it. All of our beers aren't super dry. This one's actually drier because the honey attenuates the beer. Honey is 90% fermentable. A lot of people hear honey cream ale and they think, oh, it's going to be sweet. Mm-hmm. And some people drink it and still think it's sweet, but it actually finishes drier than every beer we produce because of the honey actually dries the beer out. But you still get all the aromatics of the honey, and it makes it light and crisp and very quaffable, so you can drink a ton of it. I put the honey in at the very end of the whirlpool. We have this thing a lot of breweries don't have called a shell and tube chiller on our whirlpool, so I can chill the beer in the whirlpool from boiling down to 180 degrees, and then I can add the honey there. And I can do this for like hazy IPAs too if I want. So it's like an addition to the brew house that was, an additional cost, but we have the ability to do something cool that a lot of people don't do. And what that does is it preserves some of the aromatics of the honey. And if you use hops, because at that lower temperature, it's not searing hot, right? So it's not going to like fry those delicate aromatics. So I add that, 5 gallons bucket of honey to the whirlpool in each brew. So there's 60 pounds of honey. 120 pounds in a 20-barrel batch. And so it's super crushable, not bitter at all. And the aromatics of the glass, you really have to drink it out of a sniffer to appreciate it, but the aromatics just come out of the glass like crazy. It's really unique.
Now, I'm on your website, gridcitybeerworks.com. There's a section that says Jeremy Says. What is this? This is fascinating.
Yeah. So this is my partner, Drew. He's a marketing guru. So he has, just software companies and marketing companies. And so it's a pretty cool partnership because Justin's kind of the real estate guy and Drew is the marketing guy. And then I'm the beer guy. To have all those key pieces to the business is pretty unique because a lot of breweries open, they're like, oh, I was a home brewer and now I own a brewery. And then, I guess I should market. And if you don't know how to market, you don't know how to run a business, you don't know about real estate, like it is a business in the end, and it's tough out there if you don't understand the business. So anyway, Drew started this Jeremy Says thing as a way to create a connection with the community. And so I just once a week or so put out a little blurb, a little advice for home brewers.
Right on.
Very
That's cool.
So there, go to gridcitybeerworks.com and check that out. It's up.
And our Instagram,
there.
and Instagram, Facebook, it all pops up on there. So
let's say one of our listeners wanted to open up a business, not necessarily a brewery, not anything even to do with alcohol, but what do you have like a piece of advice that you would give them? One or two pieces of advice?
I'm not the business guy. I'm the brewery guy, but I would say find the smartest people in the areas that you need them, if they're going to be your partners, and find those people. And you really need it. It has to be a partnership. I've seen breweries where it's a one-man show, and it's just, and some people pull it off, and I'm like, how do you do that, man? There's no way you can sleep. There's no way you can have a family and enjoy your family. So it's really teamwork makes the dream work, So find the right people. We're lucky, that we came together. And one thing I didn't mention, when Justin and Drew met, Justin thought Drew was this raging alcoholic, which kind of is true. But Justin had a family, and he's like, who's this crazy guy that moved next door to me? So Justin came over to meet Drew, and Drew showed him his beer cellar, and opened Justin's mind to the beer world. And then when I came over, when I had come over and brought beer to Drew, he invited Justin over, and Justin came over, and we realized we had worked together at a bar called Lakota, which is where Butcher's Chop House is now in Park City, 20 years ago. So we actually knew each other. He was a waiter, I was a bartender back then, but he went and got his MBA in law school, and then I kept bartending and brewing. So we all kind of knew each other. So me and him knew each other from 20 years ago, which is ironic.
That's pretty rad.
So when you're not brewing beers, what are some of your other hobbies and interests? Like, what are some of the other things that keep you busy, man?
Well, I moved here to ski. I had a cousin that lived here, and backcountry skiing the Wasatch. I used to do that a lot. Used to ski a lot. Mountain biking, I really love. Used to rock climb a lot. I don't climb as much, but mountain biking and skiing are my passions.
What about your most memorable concert or sporting event that you've been to?
Man, I just saw Slayer on their farewell tour.
How was that, man?
That was freaking amazing.
I've never seen them live. I've always wanted to. I just never.
Well, it's all over now, man.
Yeah, no,
I'll probably come back in some form.
I was going to say, I mean, it seems like music bands, how many bands have had like the reunion of the reunion tour?
Exactly. Yeah, so that's the most memorable in my mind, but even though it was like a couple years ago.
Now, where did you move here from? We didn't even
Colorado.
get there. Like, okay, so you moved
Colorado.
here from,
Yep.
Do you still make it back to Colorado quite a bit?
Well, not now.
Well, yeah, of course. I guess
My mom lives there. My mom lives there. I was there for the CBC a year and a half ago or so. The Craft Brewers Conference was there. So that was great. Denver's become a zoo, man.
It's been a long time since I've been there. I need to make another trip out there.
I mean, it's a great city for cocktail bars and breweries and distilleries and food off the charts, right? But if you want to do the outdoor thing, Utah has it going on, man. It's all so accessible. We have the desert a couple hours away. So much going on here as far as outdoors, and so accessible. You got traffic there like crazy. Try to go skiing, man, from Denver. It's a 3-hour wait, It's nuts.
Let's shift gears to Salt Lake City. We have a few Salt Lake City related questions that we ask on the show. I'm sure you've had to show friends and family around Salt Lake City, like when they visit, right? And you have to show them around. What's the Jeremy tour? Like, where do you like to take people to? Like a hike or a city or building?
Well, when I worked at High West, I would take them to the distillery and give them a distillery tour right away because I thought that was the coolest thing they could see. And then up into the mountains, the desert. I got married in the desert outside of Moab in the La Salle Mountains at the Whispering Oaks Ranch, which is like the top of this crazy trail called the Whole Enchilada. It's like a 35-mile trail. It's like 6,000 vertical feet. So I'm in love with Moab. I lived down there for about 9 months. Love the desert, man. Love the entire southern part of the state. It's absolutely gorgeous. Nice place to get away. But yeah, so it's anywhere from mountains to desert to local breweries to distilleries.
What about if you could change one or two things in Salt Lake City? If you had the opportunity, I guess
Pre-COVID?
Yeah, pre-COVID.
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 Well, it's tricky, man. You change it too much and then you're going to end up like Denver and you're going to be too busy, right? So, if they could just maybe loosen up the laws on beer content a little bit, that would be nice. Maybe push. Yeah, I mean, the liquor laws have gotten better. We were stoked that the beer content law went from 4 to 5%. Yeah, maybe loosen up a little for local businesses, right? Because they didn't loosen it up for local businesses. They loosened it up for the big boys because they felt the pressure, or they got the green. So I would say that. Other than that, it's a great place to live, man. It's smart. I think it's a pretty smart state. It's a little conservative, but I mean they run it pretty well, I think, and it's business friendly unless you're a certain kind of business. But if they took care of all local businesses the same, I think that's the one thing I would change. Because they think we're after their children, but we're not. The children are drinking Bud Light and Coors Light. And, the wine coolers, if you're lucky, that's what your children are doing, right? Yeah, I mean, they just I don't know, they just don't understand the art and the craft of craft beer and craft spirits and how it applies to reasonable, responsible adults, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, the art is lost on the more general population here, for sure.
It is, and so it's our job, and it's our job to change that, right? So, yeah, we're all about education at Grid City, and we're looking forward to getting people in there and educating them on beer, because our beers are served 3 different ways. Even our house pilsner is served 3 different ways. So I'll talk about our last beer, our brown ale. So we noticed people don't brew a lot of brown ales, and I brewed this beer for my partner Drew's cousin's wedding, and they loved it, man. They crushed like 3 kegs of it. It's a really good beer. It's all British malts. Maris Otter is a base malt, like a rich aromatic British malt. And it's got like British chocolate. It's got flake barley to give it body, and some really nice crystal malts. And a British yeast. So it's really just a nice, complex, malty, kind of chocolatey, rich brown ale. But it's still pretty crushable because it's only like 4.6% ABV. So it's easy drinking. And so those 3 ales we serve on CO2, which is going to bring out more of the brighter flavors, CO2, more effervescent, right? Then we serve it on nitro. So we have these beers. So when I put the beers in the cold storage, I'll carb up. So I separate them into 6 tanks. So each beer goes into 2 different tanks inside the cold storage. And one is carbed up manually with CO2. So that's just our CO2 beer. And the other one's inline carbonated with nitrogen. So it's nitrogen infused beer. So it's a combination of like 75% nitrogen and 25% CO2. And it's done with these, we call them cellar streams in our cold storage. And so the beer stays still inside the serving tank, and it's pushed with a beer pump and inline carbonated. And it comes out through a stout faucet, like a Guinness faucet. And it creates this rich, creamy head, displaces the CO2, and gives it this silky, soft kind of body and mouthfeel. So it's a different experience drinking that beer other than CO2, where it's like brighter and maybe a little more acidic. And then we do cask beer as well. So those 3 beers are all broken off in the fermenter. I will break those off into separate kegs and either let them finish fermenting in the kegs, or I'll pitch wort that I've saved from those beers that I've dosed with yeast and let ferment, and then I'll pitch those and they'll re-ferment in the casks. So then those are served on these British style beer engines. So we have 3 beer engines. Have you guys seen those beer engines? You got the big handles and people pull them. It's a mechanical engine, and it just literally just pulls the beer, and then there's a sparkler on the tip that agitates the beer when it comes out, and it creates this foamy, dense head. And those beers are kept at 50 degrees. So the definition of cask beer is like a beer that's served in the vessel that it finished fermentation in. So natural CO2 and then served on the beer engine at a lower temperature. They call it cellar temperature, between 50 and 55 degrees. And so that's a different experience of drinking beer. So that was kind of our goal, to show people how a beer can be served 3 ways and taste completely different.
Man, this guy knows his stuff, Chrissy.
I know. I'm like, so many people could learn from you.
I'm so excited to come in and check out your place. I mean, it's kind of weird that we have you, and before we've even had an opportunity to check you out. But
But we're definitely checking you out.
Yeah, man. And I'm so glad you came on the podcast and got to share a little bit of your story. I know we can go into more depth and everything, but is there anything that you want to make sure that we talk about before we completely wrap it up?
Well, our Pilsner is served 3 ways too. And we sought out these pretty unique faucets from the Czech Republic. They're called Luker faucets.
Okay.
And they're bigger and they're longer and they're slender and they have a wooden handle and they side pull. You don't pull them from the front, you side pull them. And they have a flow adjustment on them, so you can go with a high flow or a low flow or restrict the flow. And then they have a screen that agitates the beer as it comes out. So we can do 3 different pours for our house Pilsner, and this fits into our brand, and it's a pretty unique experience. So there's a milk pour where it's 100% wet foam in the glass, and you just drink the foam. It's pretty cool. You get a different sensory experience of hop and malt when you do that. Then there's a crisp pour, which has more CO2 and a less dense head. And this is like crisper and better to drink with food. Kind of cleanses your palate because of the high CO2 content. And then there's the smooth pour. And this is for you hanging out after dinner, having a few pints, with your friends. And this has less CO2 and a richer, thicker head that stays on top of the beer the entire drinking experience to protect it from oxidation. And this is how they do it in Czech with Pilsner Urquell. And we thought that would be kind of a cool experience with our Pilsner since it's so Czech heavy. And so that's part of the experience at Grid City.
Very cool. So cool. Now give your address again one more time here. Your address, your website, all that stuff.
333 West, 2100 South, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84115. It's a big black building right next to IHOP across from Home Depot. It's literally you see our sign, Grid City Beer Works, right when you walk outside of Home Depot. That's all you're staring at is beer. It's kind of cool.
And right now, people can come in and get some of your beer, take it to go?
And our chef's throwing down some killer food to pair with the beer. He's only doing like one thing a day now, but we always have a vegan option and we always have a regular option for food. And we're going to do that when we open as well, because one of our partners is vegan. We realize, the importance of that and catering to that base of clientele. And even all of our sauces and everything else are vegan. So even like our aioli is vegan. So no one has to worry when they come in about sauces not being vegan. All that stuff is vegan. It's still really, really good. But you can still get your meat. You can get all that stuff too.
It's good to know.
And we have some seltzers coming out, and I have to tell you about those.
Oh, yeah.
So, we're doing non-GMO corn sugar, brown rice sugar, and we're doing 2 different seltzers. We're doing a cucumber lime, which I've already made several times. It's really refreshing and delicious, 5%. And then we're doing a hop seltzer where I'm using those same cryo hops, which just create this rich aromatic kind of hop character. And that hop seltzer will be out as well. So look for those. We're about to start canning those in a couple weeks, and you'll probably see those at Whole Foods within 3 or 4 weeks, I would imagine. Or you can pick them up at our brewery. But just look for our website and for that information to come out. So I like drinking seltzer when I'm not drinking beer, man. It's low calorie, it's refreshing, it's crisp.
It's good stuff. Chrissy has a final question that she asks everybody that comes through here. Jeremy, I'm going to let her ask you that. Thank you again so much for coming and doing the podcast. And I always tell people, let's catch up down the road.
Awesome, man. Thank you, guys.
So before we let you go, can you tell us what a motto or piece of life advice that you would leave for our listeners would be?
Stay true to yourself, work hard, keep your eyes open.
Thanks again to Jeremy Gross for joining us on this episode. All the links that we mentioned in this conversation can be found with this episode show notes on our podcast website, which is at iamsaltlake.com/433.
All right. It is time for weekly recommendations, quarantine style. We got some quarantine weekly recommendations. This is the time of the podcast where Chrissy and myself, we just kind of recommend something that either we believe in or we've gotten into over the last week or something that we just want to recommend to you guys.
Exactly. And everything right now is stuff you can do at home.
Well, because we're kind of stuck at home.
Yep.
Well, we're not really stuck at home. I can go to the grocery store and do the stuff I want. I choose to be here.
Solid point. But we can't go everywhere we'd ideally love to go.
Anyway, what's your weekly recommendation, Chrissy?
My weekly recommendation, as lately has all been entertainment, is What We Do in the Shadows. This is a new TV show based off of the movie What We Do in the Shadows. And it is hilarious. And if you are a history nerd like me and you enjoy just weird comedy, You will absolutely love this. The last episode, they actually mentioned the Mechanical Turk, and if you know what that is, you are my best friend. So go check out what we do in the shadows. You will not regret it.
What did you say, the Mechanical Turk?
The Mechanical Turk. It was I
want to be your best friend.
Oh, good. Yeah, work on that. Make some notes.
My weekly recommendation. It is the almighty Volcano. Volcano Vape. It's a classic. It's a
big classic.
It's like a dome silver vape
machine. It's a what do you put on your counter in the kitchen? Real pretty to make stuff with.
Well, anyways, it's the Volcano Vape machine.
Yes.
It blows cannabis vape smoke into the bags, and then you vape them. Anyway, I was able to get my hands on one over this last weekend. Actually, my brother Rob, he at Empire, actually, he got him in, and he's like, you should come down and
test it out,
try it out. And I think I'm going to actually end up having to get it.
It's great. It's a healthy way to enjoy your cannabis.
Oh my gosh.
Especially if it's for medical purposes.
Well, especially here in Utah where you're not supposed to put the flame on the cannabis, but oh my gosh, check it out. It's a Volcano. It is an investment, but it is worth it. And that is my weekly recommendation.
I love it. And don't forget, you can always access the entire back catalog of the I Am Salt Lake podcast at iamsaltlake.com. I'm sure there's an episode that you haven't heard yet.
All right, guys, have a great week. Get out and enjoy the city. Support local, especially this week. Let's work hard this week to support local. And we're going to see you on the next episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
And good night, Grammy.